Good evening, Brian, and welcome to the Lodge Hope of Karachi Lockdown Lecture Series, Zoom meeting number 71. And it's a great pleasure as ever to welcome you along here this evening, particularly as it's such a sunny night outdoors, and many of you should be out cutting the grass or weeding the plants or on the bowling green. But it's a great delight that you're here for another night of Masonic education with the Lodge Hope of Karachi. As ever, Brian, can I remind you of the Grand Lodge of Scotland guidelines? Please keep your video running, a recognisable name in the name box. If you do have to switch your video off due to eating lunch or that your bandwidth problems come along, just drop me a little message, Brian, so I know what's happening. That'd be very much appreciated. Also, can I kindly ask you to sign our virtual tile on our Facebook pages. Again, that is very much appreciated. Brian, this evening, it's a great pleasure to welcome Brother Shelby Chandler to join us. I met Shelby a few months ago now on a Saturday afternoon Masonic Zoom meeting with the Virginia Lodge of Research. Some of us from the Lodge Hope of Karachi have been joining them every other week on a Saturday afternoon at 3 p.m. And I would highly recommend it if you do happen to be in Brian to join them. They have some very interesting guest lecturers. And I listened to this presentation that Brother Shelby Chandler is going to give this evening, and I've held him back for a few weeks because it's very fitting that his presentation, the 80th anniversary of the founding of the movement that he's going to talk about, is this week. So Brother Chandler was initiated and passed and raised in Fredericksburg Lodge number 4, and he's been a Virginia Mason for over 17 years. He was the master of his mother lodge in 2011, and he served as the charter master for the George Washington Lodge of Research number 1732 in Fredericksburg, Virginia. He currently serves as both the tiler and the lodge historian at his mother lodge. Since that time, he's been a member of the Grand Lodge of Virginia's Committee on History and Committee on Masonic Education, and he's currently serving as Masonic District Number 8's District Education Officer. And he's part of a team that is developing the Grand Lodge of Virginia's Masonic University, working under the Grand Provost with the Most Worshipful Edmund Cohen, heading up the VMU as College Dean. And I'm sure, Brian, that will be of interest to many of us watching how that develops. Shelby also has academic degrees in the fields of computer science, military studies, and history, and was awarded the honour of a magna cum laude and graduating from the University of Arizona. The James Monroe Memorial Foundation has elected Brother Chandler to be their Fredericksburg Scholar and Historian and the Assistant Superintendent of the James Monroe Birthplace Park and Museum, and he's also a member of the National Advisory Board. He's an Army veteran and he's married with 3 girls and 3 beagles. And having girls and dogs as well, Shelby, I give you my deepest sympathies because I know the pain that you're going through half the time as well. But without any further ado, can I introduce to you all Worshipful Brother Shelby Chandler. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, my brethren. Fraternal greetings from Virginia, and I wish each of you well. And I noticed some of the people that I've met over Facebook are present, and I thank you for them, and I thank each of you for being here. Truly appreciate the introduction, and I want to talk about the French resistance, but I'm going to be doing it from the point of view of one brother, Michel Bellon. Michel Bellon was a member of Fredericksburg Lodge. He was the tiler for a long time, and one time while he was tiling, he began to tell me some of his story about his life. And I came to realize he was a child during the French resistance. And he started talking about how his father, who was a Mason, was part of it. And as soon as he started telling me the story, I was like, we need to record this. He's not going to be around forever. And so basically, with the help of a Masonic organization for veterans over here in the United States, known as National Sojourners, we got him recorded on tape. So I'm going to let you know right now My degree in history and military studies, most of my focus in history is from colonial era. The George Washington Lodge of Research focuses mostly on colonial masonry, military masonry, and Scottish masonry. However, because of Michel Ballone being a good friend and a brother, and his story, his personal story, I am presenting what I know from what he has conveyed to us, as well as what we've done research around that. I am not an expert on the French resistance. What I am is an expert on Michel Ballone, and I'm presenting it from his point of view and from the information that many of us have gathered during that time. The three other brothers that assisted me on this research and are part of the research was also brother Dennis David, worshipful brother Christopher Decker, and worshipful brother Tony Rudder. All four of us were very close with brother Michel Ballone. He passed away later on, but we can say that we did make sure that we recorded his life story and the information that was about it. So I guess any questions that we will have, please ask me after the presentation, and I guess we can go ahead and get started unless anybody has a question right now before we get started on that.
I think just go straight into the presentation, Shelby, please.
Okay, in that case, let me see if I can get in there now. Share screen. Boom, there it is. Okay, so let me see if I can get this on the show part of it. I know people have problems with it sometimes, but actually, let's go ahead and just leave it at this right now.
If you go down to your bottom right-hand corner, there's the projectors. So just, yeah.
Got it. All right. So we're going to talk about Michel Ballone, Freemasonry, and the French Resistance. Now, this is going to be focused mostly on Freemasonry and its impact on the French Resistance, and not so much about their entire storyline, because it's based off of what we learned from Michel Ballone. Brother Michel Ballone was born in Paris, France on December 19th, 1926, and he died at the, I missed that. He died in 2014. As for his Masonic record, he was initiated, passed, and raised in Amity Lodge in Massachusetts. And there's his birth dates. And I use the word birth dates because later on you're going to find out something very important about that wording. His initiation, passing, and raising. He would later affiliate with Fredericksburg Lodge in 1998, and he would go on to primarily work as the Tyler of the Lodge. He didn't want to do much of anything else, but he loved being Tyler, and he was also part of the ambassador to the Masonic Home of Virginia, which is where we Masonic Brothers in Virginia has an opportunity to go to when they need medical assistance or when they're much older. So he was the ambassador there, and he brought back information from there at the time. Okay, let me see if I can minimize the side screen here. Okay, right, what you see here is decision number 297, Secretary of State to the Presidency of the Council of State, cite the Order of the Brigade, Michel Henry Ballone. In August 1943, as a liaison officer to the Astor Network sector of the France Fighting Force in Nacelle, voluntarily committed at 17 years of age to the Army of the Vercors, and took part in the French regions of Versailles, Romont, Vasmille, and please forgive me if I mess this up, Taines and Lyon. He showed great courage and military qualities by successfully destroying at the peril of his own life a German ammunition depot. After the liberation, he joined the 2nd Airborne Infantry Regiment, 4th Battalion of Foot. This quote includes the award of the Military Cross with the Bronze Star. Michel Ballon received the Croix de Guerre during this timeline, this part of his life. But he didn't start off in the military. He started off later on. I knew this thing was going to get in the way. Let me move it. Great. Might have to adjust this for myself. Give me a second here. Cancel this out. Sorry about that. I got this screen over here that I can't minimize, and that's probably why I didn't have it expanded before. Okay, here we go. On November 16, 2007, at a meeting of the National Sojourners, Chapter 545, Brother Michel gave a presentation on his life as a 14-year-old boy with the French resistance of Nazi-occupied France and the Masonic leadership that had helped organize these French patriots. Just to let you know also, Brother Michel was a member of a lodge up in Washington, D.C., which did all their degree work in French. And he loved going up there. He took some of us up there as part of his brotherly affiliations. He tried to keep close to other French brothers. On June 22nd, 1940, as you all know, France surrendered to Nazi Germany, and Britain found that they stood alone. France was divided into two sections: the occupied zone, controlled by the Nazis, and the free zone, which was controlled by the fascist Vichy government allied with the Germans and Italians. Those who resented German occupation and the Vichy government formed cells that were collectively named the French Resistance. As you can see on that map there, that's how it was cut out between the Nazis and Vichy. And of course, the Nazis held great control over the Vichy government itself. The German Gestapo, or secret police, controlled the internal operations of the occupied zone. The Milice Française, or French militia, also known as the Milicien, a paramilitary force trained by the Gestapo, controlled internal operations within the Vichy government of the Free Zone. According to Spartacus Olsen, host for the Time Ghost chronological documentary, the French people were unable to even consider the means to resist because they were in a state of collective shock. Now, it's interesting how we read into this. Well, we have to read into it because we weren't there to experience it, but we really need to take ourselves back and understand this. They were emotionally reeling, not just from the sense of betrayal they felt of their own government, which surrendered, but from the swiftness of the German military ability to take control and coordinate their efforts through force and policies. The various organizations that were large enough to resist German occupation were either not as yet willing to resist or were at ideological odds with each other, be they nationalists, communists, academics, clergy, and various other social groups or cultural groups. This is something we don't consider much nowadays. Furthermore, the complete surrender of the French military ensured that 1.8 million soldiers would remain prisoners of war instead of being out in hiding with the means to resist. This could have been the one entity large enough and capable enough of bringing together the French people to resist. As a result of this total loss and sense of defeatism, there was a lack of popular support for resistance by many of the French people. They were not only struggling with their new subjugation, but also with the traitorous acts of many of the French who chose to support the Vichy government. Olsen believes that the day the French collectively set their minds to resist began on July 14th, 1941, anniversary, when General Karl Heinrich von Stopnagel, the commander of the occupation of France, reported that 5,600 Parisians defied orders and demonstrated against the Germans at the Place de l'Etoile. October 13th, 1940, once the Military was established and trained, the Vichy Free Zone government immediately decreed that all Freemasons were to be arrested, and they sent many of our brethren to concentration camps. The Vichy propaganda machine went into overdrive to label Freemasons a threat to the French people. That little picture right there is one of those, was a homemade, it was a government-made movie talking about how the Masons betrayed the French people. Following this policy, the Freemasons within the occupied zone convened to discuss the idea of the first active passive resistance force and left the meeting agreeing to no more than 3 active participants per lodge in this resistance. As a result of this meeting, the natural network of 211 French Masonic lodges became the core foundation of the newly established French resistance. Let me say that again. The word I use there is the natural network. Freemasonry, with all your lodges in every single town, is a natural network within our society. And they took that opportunity to come together and created a resistance group. And they decided that 3 and no more than 3 would participate actively. The agreement of 3 active members per lodge was so that if any of the 3 were caught, the rest of the brethren would be protected and none would know of the others. None would know who took their place, in other words. It was further agreed that many of the Masons were to join the various military groups with the intention of returning home to teach others what martial skills they learned. A Masonic resistance group is functional and operational because Masonic lodges are a natural network within any society. If you look at this map right there, this gives you an idea of where all the different Masonic lodges and how many were in different cities and towns. Kind of hard to see, but let me see if I can get that to expand out. That gives you a better idea of it. So the decision was made, minimize that now, that this resistance by Masons should gather intelligence, establish communications with London, assist escaping Jews, rescue downed Allied pilots, sabotage German and Vichy machinations and policies, and to support Allied espionage infiltration. It was also later recognized that some of these Masons would freely volunteer to work within the Vichy and German government in order to collect information to be sent to London. Okay, Michel's father was a Freemason and a member of the resistance, as was his stepfather, Roger Villon, who was a leader of one of the Masonic lodges and one of the 3 selected from his lodge. He will go on to become the commander of the Andromeda sector of the resistance. Michel, as a boy, was also permitted to support the resistance and would become invaluable to their efforts because of his ability to befriend enemy officers and later for his English-speaking skills to be able to act as a translator. One of the things about Brother Michel Villon is at a very young age, he spoke English. He also learned how to fly at a very young age as well, which actually will become of importance later on in this discussion or presentation. On June 17th, 1941, this group of Masons formed the Provincial Council of French Masonry, communicating with London and working out of an apartment in Paris. This would become the decision-making committee of action until 1944. Brother Michel tells of a story of Brother Levant, who for a time headed this provisional council. Brother Levant was arrested, sentenced, and sent before some elderly German gentleman of great authority who repeatedly asked him for his quote unquote birth dates. Shortly thereafter, Brother Levant realized that his interrogator was a German Freemason who was attempting to learn of his Masonic birth dates. Once he established that Brother Levant was indeed a French Mason, the German brother not only let him go, but gave him the name of the informer who turned him in, a French Mason who was also part of the resistance. While many Freemasons were captured, tortured, and killed by the enemy, of those captured, few were imprisoned, but most were sent to Germany to be interred into concentration camps. That symbol right there was the symbol that was worn by Masons. If you don't know, most of you probably do. I'm sure you're very informed about European history, but there was this signature identified as a political prisoner, which Freemasons were considered. Captured Freemasons were not given trials. They were tortured for information, then sent to German concentration camps. They were designated political prisoners and required to wear the red triangle on their clothing. According to the publication, Our Red Triangle, the number of Freemasons killed by Nazis and their counterparts is estimated to be at about 80,000 to 200,000. Our Red Triangle was a publication by Juniata Lodge number 282 back in 2012, by the way. This is a picture of Brother Michel Ballone's stepfather, Roger Ballone. This is taken, it says April 11th, 1945, the very day I was delivered from Buchenwald death camp by General Patton's army. And this is, he was a picture that he sent to his kids. Brother Michel's father was captured working for the resistance. He is tortured and then sent to Auschwitz concentration camp, where he shortly thereafter, he laid down his working tools. Brother Roger Ballone, his stepfather, is also captured and tortured. He is sent to the concentration camp at Buchenwald, but he survived long enough to be rescued. Michel himself had his own part to play in this resistance movement. Initially, he was sent to the Free Zone, where he collected information and delivered documents and reports to people going back to England. Brother Michel noted that as a kid, he befriended an Italian officer who hated both Mussolini and the Germans so much that he would divulge information on what the Germans were doing. And young Michel would get the information to, quote unquote, the right people. By the way, that was not a picture of the Italian officer himself. It's just a picture of a random Italian officer, just to let you know. Because of this, his stepfather, Brother Roger Ballone, showed up to get him and informs him that his name was on the German capture list and that they were at that moment coming to arrest him. So he was taken to a school where he would be safe, and which happened to be a central and major part of the French resistance regarding partisan activity. And Michel chooses to join them as a soldier of the Aster sector. Brother Michel reported that when he first got to the school, the British would drop night deliveries of basic need items to them twice a week. But shortly after the Americans joined the fight, the Americans took over and began dropping clothes, ammunition, rifles, mortars, explosives, and machine guns nightly at an unprecedented rate. Then one night, 3 Americans dropped from the sky and informed the resistance that they were OSS agents sent to prepare them to assist in the upcoming Allied invasion. So the Americans trained the French in the use of these equipment and worked together to clear the field below the school for incoming gliders and paratroopers. The Office of Strategic Service was a wartime intelligence agency and a predecessor to the Central Intelligence Agency in the United States. Eventually, the resistance received word that someone reported to the Nazis that there were strangers in the area. And it was eventually decided that it was time for the Americans to leave. The head of this school informed the Americans that they would need to escape, but someone would have to be their interpreter in their trek overland to Spain. Since Brother Michel Ballon spoke English, he was assigned to the duty of getting them out of France. Now understand, this is years later. Michel Ballon is much older. He began the resistance back in 1939 and 1940s, 1941, when the Germans took, when the date that he took over, they took France. That shortly thereafter is when he got involved. So he started off a young kid. Years have gone by before the Americans came into it. It was during this journey to Spain that Michel and the Americans would see the aftermath of many atrocities done to the people, whose bodies were left by Germans as an example for others to see and fear. Brother Michel Ballon reported seeing the bodies of rape victims and children, and that they would be something that he would remember forever. And it always made him angry to recall it. He one time did tell me in some detail some of the things he saw, and he don't know why he felt he had to do that, but it really, really bothered him. And I think it's more because he felt that I would be someone who'd listen and would want to report to ensure that this never happened to another person in history, or learn from history. And we learn from it so that we can prevent it from happening again. Brother Michel and the three Americans would eventually make it to the United States Embassy in Spain, where they were immediately given a flight to London. It is here where Michel's American friends are separated from him in order to be officially debriefed regarding their time with the resistance. There is a map that I found doing research about the French resistance and how they got in and out of France. And the primary map, the red drawing there, is designated as one of the main ways by which people fled France during that time. So I wanted to see if you guys wanted to give this out to you so that you can see how that worked. It's possible that this is the route that he took. I didn't get that kind of details from him at the time. Just to let you know, this is an actual picture of Brother Michel Ballon. That is him as a kid. Before leaving France, his stepfather, Roger Ballon, had directed Michel to seek out his godfather in London, who was a French general. Brother Michel was not able to find him, and because he was separated from the Americans, he wanted to do something to support. So the British persuaded him instead to join the British Army SAS, or paratroopers. He made the 5 required jumps and received his wings before his godfather finally found him, and then his godfather used his influence to process Michel out of the British Army because he had other plans for him. Michel was sent to Morocco to recertify as a pilot because Michel was known to have flown planes since he was 12 years of age. While training as a French pilot in Marrakesh, he received his pilot's license and was selected as one of 10 Frenchmen to enter a U.S. Army Air Corps program to train French pilots on American fighter planes. Initially, he flew a transport plane while in Marrakesh, but the American flying program had him relocated to Casablanca, Morocco, where he was given the opportunity to fly American planes, such as the P-1 Mustang, the P-47 Thunderbolt, and the B-17 Flying Fortress. At the completion of this program, Brother Michel would fly 4 combat missions as a bomber pilot against the Germans. It was during this time that Brother Michel would meet with the Paja Tami El Ghuli, the Lord of the Atlas, who was a friend of the Boulogne family. And after hearing Michel's story, he gifted him with a pair of fighting knives for his bravery during this time in the French resistance. At the time, El Ghuli was one of the richest men in the world and would often visit friends, would be often visited by friends such as Charlie Chaplin, the French actress Colette, and Sir Winston Churchill. And he attended the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II as Churchill's guest, as Brother Churchill's guest, I should say. When the war ended, Michel was 21 years old, and for his service in the resistance, he received the Croix de Guerre, a military cross, which outside of the Legion of Honor is the highest French military citation that any military personnel could receive for acts of bravery and heroism. Brother Michel received this award at 17 for his actions at 17 years of age for destroying a Nazi fuel and munitions depot. The famous Americans who also received the recipient of this, who were recipients of this medal, were Audie Murphy, George Patton, Dwight Eisenhower, and Jimmy Stewart. I don't know of what famous British were recipients of this, but I know there must have been quite a few as well. As you can see, my focus was doing mostly this presentation in the United States. After the war, when he finally decided to come to the United States, he recalls he came to the United States in 1951, and he wanted to become an American citizen. He decided to take the day off to begin the process, but was informed that his paperwork was already approved. And basically, they put him in a room. When he first started off, they brought him in, they sat him down, he waited for hours. By the time they finally let him in, his 3 OSS friends from the war were flown in, and basically they were there when he took upon himself the oath of American citizenship. He had one of the least problems getting processed in as an American citizen because of his support of these 3 American officers. One of the things he said that was so funny was one of the first orders he was given in taking care of them upon their escape to Spain was that he had to go out and get French clothes for the 3 Americans. He said this was absolutely difficult to do because most French people were 5'8", and they were like, the shortest American was like 6'3". And so he said he had a struggle trying to get clothes that would work for them. But they were there upon his time of getting his citizenship. He also told us that they were trying to get him to join the Army Air Corps at the time. And he said, well, let me think about it. About that time, the police action in Korea happened, and he told them, forget it, I've had enough. So he instead, he would go on to become a model American citizen, flying as a pilot for Air France until he retired, and that he would be married twice. He met his second wife, Rita, who is still alive, and Rita and remained with her until his death in 2014. He loved being a Freemason. It was a major part of his life, and he was a member of Fredericksburg Lodge, and he served as Tyler from 2004 to 2008. And he would support his lodge as the Masonic Home Ambassador from 2004 to 2010 until his health began to deteriorate. By consensus of the lodge, Michel Boulogne is the first Mason since the 19th century to have his remains interred within Fredericksburg Masonic Cemetery. Just a little bit of information about the Fredericksburg Masonic Cemetery. There's a picture down there of a plaque on the cemetery wall, 1784. The Masonic Cemetery in Fredericksburg, Virginia, is the oldest Masonic cemetery in the New World, in all the Americas. It's the oldest Masonic cemetery. Interred in that cemetery are many of our Revolutionary War founding fathers, the first millionaire in the Americas, Basil Gordon, brother Basil Gordon, and other Masons and family of Masons to note. Buried within there are soldiers and revolution from the French and Indian War, the American Revolution, the War of 1812, and the American Civil War. That is a picture of us when we gave the ceremony for Michel Ballone to have his remains interred there, and a tree that was planted in his honor. These are the brothers that participated in that. The lady in the center is Rita Ballone, Michel's lady. And of course, I'm in there as well, at the far right there. And that's that is what Michel Ballone looked like in 2008 compared to when he was in London. I believe that was him wearing his uniform in London during World War II. But basically, that is the presentation that I had to give you. We know that they participated in the Vercors resistance. Most of the Masons were captured during that time. But I guess eventually the Masonic resistance joined up with the rest of the other groups, but they were one of the first to start, as you can see from the timeline of 1940, when they started discussing their council, the Masonic Council. Any questions at this time?
Brother Shelby, Chandler, thank you so much for a powerful story about a brave Freemason who stood up with courage and dedication against tyranny and stood up for his own beliefs and the beliefs of his fellow countrymen. And we've had many stories of courage about Freemasons in the war, but I think the brethren here will agree with me that listening to you with that second-hand testimony, having known the man himself, brings it so much more to life. That first-hand testimony that and the feelings that you must have had when he was telling you those stories, I believe will live with you for many, many years to come. And we're grateful that you agreed to come along here this evening to share Brother Ballone's story with us on the eve of the 80th anniversary of the coming together of the French resistance movement. So
I'm actually grateful that you waited, because you're right, the anniversary is like yet tomorrow. Or it's coming up pretty quick here. And the fact of the matter is that so many of our brothers participated in that. The courage that they must have had to, with all that around them. It's part of our legacy as Masons.
Very much so. Shelby, we do have some comments and questions for you. In the chat box, so we'll just wander our way down the chat box. Stevie Chalmers comments and asks us to acknowledge that while there are many different Grand Lodges, that there are many different Grand Lodges in France. There was about 12 of them at the time, and we've heard that from a previous speaker at our lockdown lecture series. But I think in terms of this, I think it's the Masonic connection and the Masonic story that is vitally important here. Brother Ian Walk asks, in some of the slides, there's an image of the tricolor which shows the cross of Lorraine on the white background, but at the bottom of the cross is a V. I have not seen this before. Is it significant?
When I was doing research, let me see if I can pull it up again. Give me a second here. I think the V had to do with Vercors, but I'm not certain. like I said, I'm not the expert here. I am I do a lot of investigative research in history as a historian, but for the timeline being World War II, that's not my expertise. I've learned quite a bit in my research in doing such, but I assume it had to do with Vercors, that the area by which they worked primarily out of. I could be wrong.
I think Ian,
Let me see if I can. I got to get a picture of that because I don't have it in front of me. I have. Let me see if I can pull that up again. I closed it off already. All right. Let me pull it up over here.
when you're doing that, there's another comment from Stevie Chalmers about the Grand Orient in France, which was the largest one, and had the Grand Lodge in England so worried that in around 1813,
Yes.
intervisitation was stopped.
Yes, because I guess they eventually rejected the great architect, and that was the catalyst for that. I understand that. Like I said, I am not too certain about that. I do know that Brother Michel was very much, he was very steadfast when we asked him. I did ask him about that the ones that he knew, as far as he knew, that they believed in the great architect and they followed that. So I can't answer for that. I can answer what Michel Malone's position was on it when I asked him about it, because I do know that the Grand Orient was out of favor, and eventually the Grand National, Grand Loggia National of France became the one that was recognized.
Ian Walk comments again about a very interesting man, Shelby, and I'll send you some details about the book. And it's Donald Casquet, who was known as the Tartan Pimpernel. He received honours from the French government for his work aiding the resistance and helping escapees. He was a minister in Paris, and the book of his heroism and his daring do in the Second World War is certainly worth a read, and it ties in very nicely with Brother Ballone's story as well. Sandy Thompson asks, did Brother Balone recount any of the actions that he took part in to you?
Again?
Did Brother Balone recount any of the actions that he took part in to you?
Not much. He did. He didn't really go there. The one thing is that one time when we were drinking after a lodge meeting, he did start getting into a little bit of details about how he found some of the bodies that were tortured, like the children's nose being so close to the dirt so that they would inhale it, and some of the women that were raped. But he didn't go into details of that, nor did he go much into the details of the actions that he took. And knowing, I don't think that many people who has been in conflict tends to talk much about it anyways. That's something that being around veterans is something that's standard.
Yeah, it's very personal to themselves what they saw in conflict. But I think it's important in what you've done to try and record as much of the story for future generations, because as you said at the top of the show, it's very much important that we keep this message alive of what went on.
Yeah, I mean, I was very
years ago.
cognizant of that. I was very cognizant of the fact that, he was getting up in age, and the greatest generation had stories to tell us that if we didn't record it, we would never have it back. And you can't get experience back.
A couple of comments here for you, Shelby. Thanks, Brother Shelby, for your very insightful presentation this evening. Fascinating again. Brother Shelby, thank you. That was brilliant. Another very interesting lecture. Many thanks. Well presented, Brother Shelby. Thank you. Dare we ask what happened to the brother informer?
Oh, the informer. He did say that they took care of making sure that he would never betray another brother again. He didn't say much more about that. He said that it was taken care of. A lot of brothers were captured because of him, and so I would say that it probably wasn't a pleasant thing that happened. but we understand at the time that was happening, he was not really as much involved in the Masonic side of it. He was involved in the resistance, but he was a kid still. And his interactions was mostly with Masons, but he was also sent away to be protected because the Nazis and the military was looking for him because of the Italian colonel.
And Brendan, there's a very powerful program on one of those satellite channels. There are many available called Das Boot 2. That has a very powerful story about the resistance running through it, along with the German submarine crew. So if you've not seen the series Das Boot, please search it out. From Duncan Mulholland, thank you, Brother Shelby. It was a fascinating story of a very brave brother. And he goes on to say, please pass on fraternal greetings to Brother Wayne Price and Brother Raymond Steele, affiliate members of my mother lodge. So it just goes to show, Shelby, it's a small world.
Well, yeah, Duncan's one of the brothers on Facebook that I talk to often.
Yeah.
Good to see that you're here, my brother.
Bob Potter, congratulations, Brother Shelby Chandler, on a very interesting presentation. Thank you very much indeed. Bob's had to leave us. Another excellent presentation, Gordon, sorry, but must leave as well. Fascinating story of a very brave young man. Thank you, Brother Shelby, for sharing it with us. So very, very moving. A true brother possessing great courage. Excellent presentation. Well done.
Thank you.
Stuart Donaldson, I'm sure Basil, Gordon, who Shelby mentioned, was from Falkirk. Very interesting.
Ah, okay. Yes. If that, I'm sure that's. I know that most of the brethren in Fredericksburg, when Fredericksburg Lodge was first established, it was there was a strong Scottish merchant community already here, especially on the Falmouth side of the Rappahannock River in Fredericksburg. So our masonry is deeply embedded with Scottish masonry. That's our first charter was Scottish because of it. So I am not surprised. But yeah, Basil Gordon was considered the first millionaire in the New World, and he was a brother in Fredericksburg.
Okay, thank you. And thanks, Stuart, for that one. Brother Tom Edgar comments, Brother Shelby, thank you very much for this very interesting lecture. It must be incredible to have known him personally. An extraordinary brother and hero.
It really was. And he was such a gentleman. He didn't speak much, but when he did, it was interesting when he started talking, telling me his story, because he's normally a quiet man that is always very brotherly, very kind to everyone. And it was, but when I started getting close with him, I guess it was because of shared love of history. But yeah, he was a good brother in every way.
James Burns Hogg, congratulations, Brother Shelby, on a great presentation, very interesting. Michael Monroe, who lives in Paris, Shelby. Yes, Michael, please do share the picture. You should be able to do so.
The point was that on the when you said in the beginning of the talk that did you spare the French when the Germans marched into Paris? There's often films shown of the Germans marching down the Champs-Élysées, and there's one particular character who looks very upset, and I've managed to find a still of it I'd like to share with everybody, if I can. Let's see if I can get into share mode on this. Do you see this chap on there?
It's coming up, Michael.
Oh, yeah.
Do you see him on the right there?
Yeah.
He does look very upset, doesn't he?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, how can you understand something like that on the outside? I mean, that generation of people had to deal with such a horror happening before them. I mean, even the British people, after France fell and they were alone, especially like the Battle of Britain, how do you keep your morale up knowing that you're being attacked so often. But these people were already attacked. And I mean, how do you keep yourself together like that? That's something that is, it's important to understand.
Yeah, very much so. And to listen to that first-hand testimony that we're beginning to lose now as well from the Second World War.
By the way, thank you for that picture. That really hits home, and especially knowing how Michelle was talking about all this.
Our Laird Alan Maitland comments, and he asks, it would be interesting to find out if Pierre Klosterman, Free French Air Force, was a Mason. And maybe that's a little bit of research we can do to find that out, unless you know, Shelby.
I don't. I wish I knew more about the subject matter. Like I said, my problem with history is that there's so much of it that, you can't know everything as much as you want to, you can't.
Yeah. And you're part of our history now, Shelby, having coming along here this evening to Lodge Hope of Karachi. David Brown comments.
I got so much research. It's just so much research. I have so much on my plate that I can't even get started on because I'm doing others. But yeah, I mean, if somebody wants to grab that up, I would love to know about it.
Yeah. David Brown comments, the Cross of Lorraine with the V may be a stylized version of the naval ensign as reproduced on the Free French Naval Memorial in Greenock. And there's a link, and I'll share that link later on this evening in the Facebook, Brian. Ian McIntosh, flag of the Free Republic of Vercors, 3rd of July 1944, first free democratic territory in France since the beginning of the German occupation in 1940. The V representing an anchor in that case. The V was representing Vercors and victory, Ian McIntosh says. So a couple of ideas around that. The Cross of Lorraine on Lisle Hill at Greenock does not have the V on it, says Stevie. So I'll try and find a photograph of that for the Facebook later on this evening, Brian. Bob Kerr comments, interesting talk from Brother Shelby. Thank you so much for sharing this story. And we've got more debate about it has an anchor in the V. However, I think David's conceding to Ian having the correct answer. So it's fantastic when we can get debate going between our historians and researchers here. Thank you, Stevie. Thanks again, Gordon. Interesting talk. Have to go to Lodge Zoom meeting now. It's great that the Zoom's bringing us all together, Shelby, and we've seen that in America. Ian McIntosh comments again, this declaration by Vercors was too far for the Germans, and they sent in 10,000 troops to put this insurrection down. And I think that is the last question that we've got this evening. Brother Shelby Chandler, once again, on behalf of the members of the Lodge Hope of Karachi, number 337 here in the province of Fife and Kinross, it's been a great pleasure to have you here this evening.
Gordon,
thank you for having me.
Yes, Jim?
Silver's had his hand up for quite a while.
Well, I've got only 25 people in front of me, Jim, so I can't see all, and that's why we use the chat box. So, Siva, have you got a question?
Yes. How different was the unoccupied France? Was it easier for the resistance to work in that territory, and did it really make any difference to be there?
You mean between Vichy and the occupied territory?
Yes.
Oh, that's a good question. I never thought about asking that. That's interesting. I wish I did. I answered, I do not know. At one time I could, if we've had this conversation prior, I could have asked them, and I would have loved to hear the answer on that one, but I never asked. I really wish I could have.
Another thing, have you seen the movie Inglourious Bastards? And is there any historical basis to that movie?
I do not know. Honestly, I do not know. Like I said, while I have some background in World War II history, especially military history, I am by no means an expert at it in that field. I did mostly from my research because of knowing that my grandfather was a participant in the Pacific. I try to do as much research about that based off family, but some little bit of Masonic, but I do not know. I'm sure that there are quite a few experts, historians that are experts in Europe that could probably give you a better answer than I could.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Siva.
Which I did.
Aye. Shelby, once again, thank you so much, sir. It's been a great pleasure having you here. Oh, Michael's just come. Michael, please come in. We'll take the last comment from Michael.
Yes, I just wanted to say thanks for the talk. I didn't say that first time, but thank you. It was an interesting talk. But on the point about resistance in Vichy, German-ruled France and Vichy France, yeah, they were both, resistance worked in both areas. So they were hunted down by the Germans up in the northern part in occupied France, and in the Vichy part of France, it was the milice who were hunting them down. But you have to remember that when the Americans moved into North Africa and they drove the Germans out of North Africa, joint Allied invasion by British and the Americans from east and west across North Africa, they managed to persuade the French army, who were part of the Vichy, to surrender and join forces with them. At that point, Vichy France was then occupied by the Germans. So they no longer trusted the Vichy government once the army in Northern Africa surrendered and joined forces. So yes, it was all one at that point.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, I will say that I do know that the German secret police, Gestapo, did not trust the Vichy government and kept close tabs on them anyways. So I do know that, but that's as far as it goes.
Okay, Brian, thank you. Shelby, yes, thank you so much for this evening. A very emotive and very personal story
Thank you for having my
of
brother.
Brother Billon.
Thank you for having me, my brother, and thank you, each of you, for being here. If you can find more further information, I would love to know about it. This is something that I have made personal to me. Thank you very much. And it's been a true pleasure to be with my brothers.
No, thank you, Shelby. Brian, next week we welcome back Brother Mark Smith to talk to us about the second part of his researches into the Victoria Cross, our nation's highest award for valour. And his second part of his talk is entitled Hearts of Oak, Brian. And you all recall we did have a full house for Brother Mark the last time. He's a well-known historian and military and Victoria Cross expert. And if any of you saw him on Antiques Roadshow last weekend, again, he was starring in all his glory. So it'll be a great delight to have him back again next week. So same time, same place, Brian, 7 o'clock for the 72nd meeting of our lockdown lecture series. Brian, please feel free to unmute and say your thank yous and congratulations to worshipful brother Shelby Chandler. Thank you.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you very much,
Good
Shelby.
night.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelby. That was an excellent presentation.
Brother Shelby, most enjoyable presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shelby,
Shelby.
a wonderful presentation and very, very moving. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank
you,
Shelby.
Shelby.
Absolutely brilliant presentation.
Excellent.
Really enjoyed it.
Well
Thank
done.
you. Night,
First
Brian.
class presentation,
Thank you.
Shelby.
Well.
First class.
Thank you.
Excellent, Brother Shelby. Thank you very much for this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you.
Thank you
Yes,
very much,
Shelby.
Brother Shelby. Excellent
Most interesting.
presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you.
Thank you very much, brother, for an interesting talk on one man's endeavours and help in the French resistance during the war. Thank you.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you
Thank you very much for
Brother
that.
Shelby.
Very interesting talk, Brother Shelby.
Thank you, my brother.
Very interesting indeed about the French Revolution resistance. Thank you.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you.
And I'll give you 5, Brian.
Thank you, Shelby, for a very, very interesting talk about and a history lesson as well. Thank you.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Brother Shelby.
Very much, Brother Shelby.
Brother.
And
Thanks,
for
Brother
Brian.
Shelby.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Anthony,
brother.
please for you.
It was great.
Thank you, my brother. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Shelby. First class.
And 3, Brian.
Thank you.
We always do this countdown at the end, Shelby. It just encourages them to speak. Aye, or some of them.
It really is nice. Thank you.
And 2, Brian.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I wish you and the brethren all the best, and fraternal greetings from both Fredericksburg Lodge number 4 and from the George Washington Research Lodge. And I will be sure to let them know of your good fellowship and warm welcome. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And 1, Brian. Shelby, once again, on behalf of the Lodge Hope of Karachi and all our guests here this evening from all quarters of the globe, we've got people, Brian, here from Chile, from throughout Europe, from Canada, from Scotland and from Englandshire. They've all come along here this evening to watch you, and it's a great joy to have them here every Tuesday night. So with that, once again, Shelby, thank you. Brian, the recording